I'd like to call this regular meeting of the City Council work session to order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Vice Mayor Tandy.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Remley.
Here.
Councilmember Hayden.
Here.
Councilmember Winters.
Here.
And Mayor Wolcott.
She is excused.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to start the Pledge of Allegiance now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
Not at this time, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. First item on the agenda, the regular agenda, is a non-public hearing. Discussion pertaining to the potential renaming of Surprise Farms Park to Dick McComb Park. Councilman Winters and City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This discussion that I'd like to get started about renaming Surprise Farms Park to Rick McComb Park. I want to thank Councilman Remley for seconding this issue to get it on the workshop. Just to, and not everybody knows who the former city manager was, but Dick did a lot to get the Surprise going. He came on as city manager in the infancy of Surprise. He did a lot of things to really get Surprise rolling. And I'd just like to talk about a few of his accomplishments. Not all, that's for sure, but a couple. He served 10 years as a city manager, City Surprise. That's something to shoot for, Bob. But longest serving city manager we had. He started employment with the town of Surprise in November 1990. In 1990-1991, he guided the town council to apply for CDBG and UDAG grants to start the wastewater treatment facility on Cactus Road. He installed sewer lines and sidewalks in the original town site. He led the efforts to ballot issue to the voters, changing Surprise from a town to a city in 1991, which in itself is a really good accomplishment. Negotiated a deal with the Charles L. Register Furniture Store to purchase the facility on Bell Road in the original town site, used as our town hall. And I believe that was our second town hall. And we eventually took over the whole complex, our municipal offices, from 1992 to 2009. It's now known as the AZ Texcelerator. And he orchestrated negotiations with Del Webb to start Sun City Grand in 1993. He's very instrumental in bringing in what we call it the Golden Triangle, which is the Bell Road and Grand Complex over there. Instrumental in bringing in countless annexations, filling in the county islands created by large ships of annexations in the 1980s by previous administration and council. Developed a friendship and a partnership in 1991 to 1992 with Rick West, Carefree Partners, to bring in Arizona tradition Surprise Farms. And that's when Surprise Farms were first developed. And Rick West was the person who set aside all that property in Surprise Farms for the park. And I was happy my first year on the council to be over there when we cut the ribbon for all the amenities they put over Surprise Farms. After many years of being just sand and then some grass. So that was a great thing that Dick did. Led the charge from beginning to end against the city of Phoenix on the condemnation and the acquisition of property now known as City Hall Complex with our police and fire administration buildings here. It was 640 acres, 115 acres for city use. Came out of the deal with Rick West. And because you now know we're breaking ground on a couple of different projects on that piece of property. He led the housing boom, 1996, 1998. We had 2 homes were being built in Surprise every 24 hours. It's a pretty amazing time. We would take it in money fast. We couldn't spend it fast enough. It was good old days. He ended employment with the city in June of 2000. And Dick McComb was the longest tenured town and city manager for Surprise to date. So just a few reasons why I think it would be really great to have a Surprise Farms park named after Dick McComb, since he was right on the ground floor for that project. Thank you very much for your consideration.
City Manager.
Staff is awaiting your direction, Vice Mayor.
Okay. Are there any council comments? Councilmember Remley.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. In seconding the motion of my colleague, I recalled a comment that I made on a website nearly a year ago that said, though small in stature, he was a giant of a man. And after everything that you said, that's all I can add.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, ditto that. And thank you, Roland, for bringing this forward. And thank you, Councilman Remley, for seconding it. I didn't work with Rick in the city. He'd already left when I came on the council, but I had the pleasure of working with him in Sun Village. Ken Johansson was the president of Sun Village, and I was a treasurer, and we needed a manager, and we convinced him to come out of retirement. And he did for like 5 years in Sun Village, did a fabulous job. And just like he did at the city. He's a very caring man. He was smart. He didn't suffer fools greatly. He liked to get down to business quickly, and I like that in him. And he did a great job. So I appreciate this. The only one thing I would say is that, do we need to say Dick McComb City Park? I don't know. That's just a suggestion. So that it really, because it is a city park. I don't know. That's something I think we ought to.
Councilman Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't oppose that. If that's part of the discussion, that's fine. Sometimes some of these city parks do get confused with HOA parks, but I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for my colleagues for bringing this forward. Certainly, Mr. McComb has left a legacy in the city. I think the information that has been outlined is worthy of name recognition. Certainly, what he's done. Just converting from town to city alone, and the legacy he's left, even beyond his career as a city manager. That being said, I would moving, and I'm all in favor of this. I fully support this. So just so there's no misinterpretation. But having brought this up previously in terms of looking at our parks and steering away from HOA names and creating these names and memorializing somebody like Dick McComb is perfect example of what we should be. I think what we should be doing to kind of celebrate our history, create a culture here that's not this transient population of people coming and going. And yeah, we have a history here. There are people like Mr. McComb that have built this city. But I would like to see kind of some sort of process or benchmarks that we look at, not to over process something like this. I think this is relatively easy with Mr. McComb, but as we look forward and look at identifying names and creating names, what is it that makes this individual special? I think you outlined it, but what is it that makes him special? And are those the benchmarks we look at moving forward when we want to change the name of a park or memorialize someone or something? Does that making sense, Bob?
Yes.
Just so that we have some sort of foundation to go off of, and it's not just on a whim.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Those are all good points. In thinking about this item before the meeting, and I was remembering Councilmember Williams had brought up this kind of discussion. He didn't name any names or anything, but he says, hey, we need to have a look at doing some of this. And I thought that was a good idea. So I did some research, and actually there's a lot of cities throughout the country that are kind of thinking about the same thing, big and small, established, long established. I think San Diego actually had a press release about a week or so ago. And they were looking at processes and how to do that. And it sounds like there's a consensus here that this one's okay. But going forward, to prevent any one of us from doing a motion and change immediately if we get 4 people. And I also think about, well, do we want in this process to have some kind of public input as well? Because we've heard many times on other issues that the public wants to be involved, which was something we've all been wanting to get them engaged. So I would agree that I think going forward, I think a policy and process, maybe with staff's help, and the council, maybe a committee when we discuss it with the mayor, maybe she can appoint a committee to start studying that and move ahead. But again, I think, wow, what a name to honor. I did get to meet him during the celebration before he unfortunately passed away, but just a lot of great stuff at the foundation, including the area that he'd be honored for, which is really amazing. But I'm also thinking of all kinds of other future names. I think there's a lot of worthy people out there in the future for future parks too. So I think we have a consensus on where to go on this.
Through the chair.
Councilmember Hall.
If I could, Vice Mayor, me personally, I would rather give Bob and staff direction to come up with a plan on how to do this and bring it back to us. Can you do that, Bob? Like, what's the city of Phoenix doing as an example, or what is, Chandler doing, or whatever that we could, so we're not reinventing the wheel. But I agree with Councilman Williams. I think we need some kind of a process. This Dick McComb was kind of a gimme, but in the future, what's going to be our thought process and how do we go about it? And like Vice Mayor said, getting public input, et cetera. So
Any other council member comments on that?
So, Vice Mayor, if I could just restate that staff will put together the necessary steps to rename the current park Dick McComb City Park, and we'll come back to you with an action to do that, as well as a overarching process that we can use as a guide, as well as to include things like public process, and we'll come back to you in a workshop, and we'll kind of use our own best judgment as well as what we see out there that some of the best practices are around the country.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you very much.
Item number 2, presentation and discussion pertaining an update to library feasibility study.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, members of the council. This presentation is to provide you some background and scope of the project, as well as introduce the consultant that we've selected to complete the library feasibility study. I'll introduce them after, and they'll provide some of their experience as well as the timeline and the process, what we're going to take. So as you know, City currently owns 2 libraries, and we have an intergovernmental agreement with the county library district to operate those. The city is responsible for 100% of the operational costs for both of these libraries, totals about $1.96 million. The city has experienced significant growth since 2002 when our first library opened on Bullard. City Council approved library feasibility study funds of $100,000 to complete this. This study will guide us in future library operations, library renovation projects, and potential new libraries in the future. In the meantime, we will need to renew our IGA with the county, so you will see that on an upcoming council meeting. So the scope of the project was conduct a feasibility study based on the needs of the community, gather data and feedback through community outreach, identify service priorities, goals, objectives, and activities, evaluate facility and space needs, new location possibilities, and provide cost model for capital as well as operating costs. The study will provide a recommendation for expansion or new construction, and then will also provide recommendation for continuing with the current IGA or for the city to operate. And the plan is to compile this information over the next couple months, come back to you in August, perhaps the first week in September, but right around that time period, we should have it complete. So at this time, I want to introduce our consultant, Orcutt Winslow. Tom O'Neill is the project lead on it, so I'll let him come up and introduce the rest of the team.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Vice Mayor, Councilman, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. When the City of Surprise posted a request for qualifications for this feasibility study, I looked at it and I got real excited. I've designed schools for 30 years. Every school has a library. We know libraries are changing. Several of the schools I've designed have city libraries and county libraries in it. But I realized that I need a broader team to address the needs of this study. And so what we did is we looked to an architectural firm that designs libraries across the country and outside this country. And that's Richard. He'll talk a little bit about his experience. We looked at the operations side. The IGA is a very important component of this study. So we need to understand the backside of it and how it operates and the financial aspect. June will talk a little bit about that. And then the lay of the land. Your city is growing, and it has grown rapidly, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. We need to understand where it's going to need these libraries. What's the character of the libraries? What should we do to the libraries that exist? So we're going to look at it and look at where libraries are going in the future. So this is an exciting adventure we're going to go on to examine where you are today and where you should be tomorrow.
Hi, thank you very much for having us. We're so excited to be working with you and Donna and really looking at how we can best sort of look at the best library for your community. That's really what we're all about. I'm an architect, have a practice in Phoenix, and we don't specialize really in anything, but what we do, I think, is really specialize in people and doing the best that we can, working long hours and working hard, scratching our head, collaborating with people to do the best for a broad range of projects. I've been working on libraries since I came to Phoenix in 2000. I've done libraries on the East Coast in Portland, Maine, on the West Coast in Hercules, California, in Montana, in Billings, Montana, several libraries in Phoenix, worked on planning on libraries in Madison, Wisconsin. So I worked on and know libraries, I think, really well. But what I really know about libraries is that they're all different and all communities are different. So it's really, mostly about really understanding what your library needs are to do the best we can for your library. So how do I move forward here?
Let's let June and Jay introduce themselves.
Oh, okay, right.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. My name is June Garcia, and I'm a public librarian. I've been one for 47 years. Doesn't seem possible, but it's true. 18 of those were spent in Phoenix, first as a branch manager, and then for 12 years as the head of their branch library system. I loved living here, and I loved working for the city of Phoenix. And the wonderful man I worked for, his primary fault was that he was too young to retire and let me run the library system. So I moved to San Antonio, Texas, where I was the library director. And for the past 15 years, I've been a full-time library consultant, primarily working on management issues in this country, but also doing a fair amount of international work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You'll notice on the slide that it says that I'm part of Library Strategies International. That is true. My colleague, who's not here with us this evening, her name is Susan Kent, also a public librarian, served as deputy director in Tucson, Pima for a number of years. She's been director in Minneapolis, director of the Los Angeles Public Library, and the head of the branch library system for the New York Public Library. So we bring a wealth of library experience to your study. And as I was mentioning to Tom earlier today, it's hard to have a librarian in front of you without at least one quote from a book. So one of my favorites is ones from James Thurber, in which he says, it's better to know some of the questions than all of the answers. And that's what we're here to do, is to work with you to find the answers for Surprise.
Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jay Hicks with Dig Studio, and you've seen me probably around in the past. I actually authored your Parks and Rec Master Plan just this last year. Also, I've worked about 15 years actually on your park, starting back with Lizard Run and Bicentennial Park, and currently doing the grassing plan for Surprise Farms and your pickleball court. So I'm on the team mainly because I know the lay of the land, and I've been here a lot. I know which way the Parks Department's going, and also opportunities that may present themselves for future library operations. Thank you.
Yeah, how do I advance?
Just that one.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So we synthesized your RFQ into 3 basic questions, although we've already asked a lot of questions. But number 1, are the services appropriate for your community? That's a broad question, but it's a very important question. Number 2, financial investment in the library being used is the most effective manner. So we're looking at this IGA and looking at the services that are provided by the county, and then we'll hypothesize as to how would the city run this library. You run a lot of your programs, so we want to look at that and see what are the values of this IGA. Very important question. And number 3, the current buildings, are they serving the community effectively? We've been through both your libraries. We see some things that could be modified that could really streamline their operation, but we're also looking at the future, and Richard's going to talk a little bit about that. Where do those libraries and your future libraries want to go, and what do they want to look like? So that's our next piece.
Great. Thank you. Actually, you're up.
We just wanted to highlight for you 2 of the studies that Susan and I have worked on over the past few years. The one that's most similar to yours is for the city of Ventura in California. The city is part of the county library system, and the city council and the mayor asked whether they were getting good value for their money. So we did a fairly detailed study looking what their expenditures were, what their expenditures would be to operate it separately, and gave that to the city. We did not make a recommendation. It was for their decision making. The city council decided that, at least for now, they were getting good value for their dollars, and they stayed with the county library system. The other was the city of Chattanooga. The prior mayor in Chattanooga wondered whether they were getting a good investment for their money. It wasn't a question of who would run it, but were they using the money they had as effectively as they could? And we were brought in, did a thorough study of their operations and their organizational structure. They made some significant changes and actually were able to increase collections, increase hours of service for the same amount of money. So it doesn't always happen that way. But anyway, those are just 2 of our studies that we've worked on.
I might add that once we're done with the study, coming in as a third party, I think there's huge value. We're looking at it from a completely unbiased perspective. Whichever way we go with the IGA and our recommendations, if we suggest that you stay with the IGA, we will probably make recommendations as to how to negotiate your IGA for the next round. So I think we've already seen in touring and how it operates some things that would be nicely addressed to ensure the best delivery of service.
There we go. All right. So as our study really takes, kind of looks in several different directions, I think those different directions really complement each other so that we're all kind of working together and thinking together in some of the things we're thinking about. So as an architect, I'm not just interested in what your library looks like, but I want to do the best I can to have your library work, the service it provides, in a really beautiful, elegant, graceful, very natural way. Some of the things that libraries are doing now, I think, are really interesting, and I think it's partly out of survival in a way. So it wasn't too long ago when I was growing up that libraries were the stewards of knowledge. Then the technology came along and we're trying to figure out what to do with that. And then they became the navigators of knowledge. So you went to the library to have a librarian help you how to do a search because a lot of the search engines weren't quite available yet. And then now libraries have really emerged into something. There's kind of this cultural shift now into creation. So now you're actually building a makerspace with a Texcelerator, but now libraries have really embraced creation of content as well. One thing that libraries are doing sort of by necessity, and I think is really supported by the community, is this idea of collaboration. And collaboration takes a number of different sort of faces. And one aspect of collaboration, like in this image here, is really about collaborating with other city or governmental institutions. Here, the city of Phoenix opened up College Depot, which is really kind of they're leasing space within their library to another agency, and it's Phoenix Union High School, which through funding couldn't really afford college counseling in their separate schools, and so they collected it all within Phoenix Central Library. And it's one example of how a library can collaborate with other parts of the community. Another aspect of collaboration comes down to the clients, the customers, and how they work together and collaborate together, and how you actually do that in a way that really celebrates what they do. Couple images here, one Billings, Montana, and one Phoenix Central, kids hanging out in a cafe and sitting and discussing their homework or playing a board game. It doesn't really matter. They're in there and they're talking and they're learning. So providing these kinds of spaces that are fun and inviting and work really well as well. Creativity. This gets back to this idea of maker spaces, and it takes all shapes and forms. A lot of what you see are spaces that have equipment and provide instruction for kind of digital creation, but I've seen it all the way down to car repair, to farming, to seed farms, to knitting clubs, you name it. It's really all about creation, and the communities, across the country are really looking for those kinds of things. I think maybe most important, and we tend to forget it, is flexibility and adaptability. And a library that is adaptable and flexible is a library that's going to survive. And one that's not is one that's going to wither, because you can't, say the facility, because it can't transform itself to what it needs to be 5 years and 10 years down the road. So looking for libraries, when we design libraries, how can we create something? Because I don't know what the library in 10 years is going to look like. But what I can do is provide a space that gives that library the best chance to be what it can be. With that, with the idea of flexibility, is one that happens maybe over the course of years and one that happens daily. And so here in Agave Library, it's a branch library about the size of your library. And one of the needs they had was a computer training lab. Well, you could make a space, a classroom space that sits there unoccupied most of the time with equipment, computers that people never use. We thought about it a little differently and said, how can we create a space that gives enough kind of acoustic and visual privacy that can be used as a classroom, but then it can also be opened up and extend the electronic island too. So it's a multi-purpose space. Or here in Phoenix, in the Teen Center in Phoenix Central Library, designing bookshelves that can be slid out of the way. So it's kids can do homework in the afternoon, move the shelves out of the way, and have a dance in the evening.
So this is our process. We've begun the project research. We've gathered a lot of data. The city's been kind enough to share a lot of data, same with the county system. We've began to take input. We've interviewed the folks at both branches along with the county, and that shared a lot of information. It was very, very helpful. So we're going to go through this research and discovery phase of now about 2 months. By the end of May, we'll be complete with that. Then we start assembling our analysis. We start looking at programs. We start looking at the components to the study, and that'll be through the month of June and into July. And after that, we'll create our first draft. You'll have that first draft to look at. You'll have questions. We'll address those questions, and we'll finalize that study for you. So it's methodical. We've already stepped into it. It's exciting. We've got a lot of information to mold into a final product. And we'd like to open up for questions.
Any council members have questions? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, when you're getting input, could I suggest somebody to talk to also? Have you talked to the Friends of the Library?
We had a meeting with them about 2 hours ago.
Outstanding, because I think they could give you a perspective on it.
And we're looking at senior groups, we're looking at teen groups, we're looking at the community and workshops, the Friends of the Library, all very, very important, and we've got it on the calendar.
Okay. I love for me personally, I love the flexibility part of it, because I think, as you said, Richard, that who knows what the library is going to be like in 10 years, but if we create the space that's flexible enough to adapt to whatever that is, I think the better off we are. And I like the flexible bookshelf idea. Yeah. That's why not? Right. You know, office buildings do it.
Yeah,
right.
Stacks on wheels and stacks on skids, as he mentioned. Furnishings that can be adjusted, walls that can collapse.
Right.
Walls don't have to be operable partitions; they can be translucent. There's a lot of options.
Exactly, there. And I think the lighting. I'm sure you're looking at the lighting. The lighting in our libraries, I don't think is really the best, in my opinion. I'm not an architect or a light guy, but it just, as a user, I think our lighting could be better. Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think if we're if we're going to create space for teens, it needs that we need to take that in consideration, because teens respond to light, I think, and so colors and et cetera. So anyway,
Councilmember Remley.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I've already got you on my schedule for my next monthly meeting over in District 4 over by the Hollyhock Library. I'm very much looking forward to your presentation and also the input from the community at that time. I hope we'll have a really good turnout for it and kick this off pretty good.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it also. What we feel is important is if we just ask questions, the folks we're talking to are in a paradigm. They don't understand what the opportunities are. So these workshops, what we're going to do is open with some slides that can show what the potential is, what's out there to open up their minds to these focus groups.
Good idea.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'll go ahead and make a couple of comments also. When I was reviewing the background material on this, I was pretty impressed with not only the breadth of it, but the direction of where we're going and things that we're looking at. Libraries have come a long way in the last few decades. A little over 25 years ago, I was staff to the Orange County, California Public Librarian. I was the budget chief of an organization called the General Services Agency, and we had our San Diego Library System, the Lending Library, and then also the Orange County Public Library and all the 28 branches. They have a lot more now. Back at the time, and we were still using card files, I think, back then. But what I really was impressed with is you almost kind of leaping forward and making it look like industry. I have some high-tech clients, and this is how their new facilities, this is how people work now. So I liked seeing that, because I think the state of Arizona is kind of on the tipping point of maybe being a tech powerhouse, and that's not the only thing the library is going to serve, but I think if we at least also serve that. One thing I can't help but think about is, and I don't know if it's in scope, but I would hope it would also take a trip out to the White Tanks branch, because that's so close in proximity, and it's such a beautiful branch. And it has such great architectural style. When I first drove up to it, I was kind of going, it kind of looks out over the valley, and I'm going, they don't have any windows facing the valley. Why aren't they taking care of the view, and you walk into it, and what a sense of place. The windows are in the back in the Sonoran Desert and the White Tanks Regional Park, but fantastic places to work in there. I'm also real interested in, the technology aspects. Do we have enough computers there? What kind of uses should we have, and how should we work on it? And the other thing that it strikes me is we do have impact fees saved up for this, so we're going to have an opportunity to make a decision on what we want to do with this fairly within the next couple of years, I think. So, any other questions?
On the comment you just made, we are going to do comparisons to other libraries. That's a very important piece. Outstanding libraries are throughout the country, so that will be part of this.
Right, but I think that branch specifically, because it's so in proximity, it's kind of practically on our border. It'd be real interesting to see how that works, interplays with our other branches, because they will impact each other. And the last part is, I'm kind of curious to, I'll wait for your study, but are there opportunities for kind of like kiosk libraries or smaller in different areas, say, looking forward with what we are planning for the city here with the downtown, a little more walkability and a little higher intensity use right around the civic center here. So those kind of looks also would be helpful for me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3.
This is a presentation and discussion pertaining to an update on park shade projects.
This is me as well. So just to recap, we were asked to bring this back. There are some playgrounds without shade structures. Community Park, Bicentennial, Gaines, Marley Park, Viramonte, Johnson Townhome, Sierra Montana, and Surprise Farms. Probably important to note that Asante does have shade, 3-star. We just replaced the playgrounds at 3-star and Stonebrook, so they currently have shade now. And the community park, although there's not shade structure over the playground, there is over all the park benches that surround that. So staff were asked to evaluate the most impactful way to place these structures in the city and return to council with our recommendation. So we have those listed here. Back when we were doing the Surprise Farms and the dog park project, the intention was to have shade there. We did run out of funding, so we do have that listed here. After that, we looked at prioritizing playgrounds because they are available 12 months out of the year. We prioritize those over the splash pads because typically we only use those 6 months. So looking at the playgrounds, we kind of prioritize them strategically throughout the city. Some of these obviously don't have some trees that, have grown up like Marley Park. That's one of the parks we have where trees are pretty large there and do provide some shade. So that's basically how we came up with this list. And then there is some examples of what those shade structures will look like at those various parks. And then, of course, we do have kind of an ongoing list, and so we'll keep working on that. Perhaps there's some grants out there that we can work on and try to shade the rest of our facilities. But just looking kind of for some feedback, see if we're on the right track.
Okay. Councilman Winters.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Don, I'm just a little astounded on the costs for these shade structures. $86,000 just for Surprise Farms. Are they solid gold or what?
No. There's some engineering costs that go into that. And then too, just how the playgrounds are laid out. It kind of depends on the type of style of shade that we would need to put in there. So
what are these made of? Are they
they're fabric,
steel structures?
So they'll have steel structures, and then they have the fabric on top.
Stretch across the top. And of course, they're not going to come tumbling down during a real bad windstorm, man.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I was going to ask about the engineering, but you answered that. We want to make sure that because we get microbursts here, as you know, and so we want to make sure that they're engineered to where they don't turn into a hazard. So But that's part of this. Part of the expense is the engineering expense,
Right.
isn't it?
It's going to go through our permitting process through community development. So.
Yeah. Okay. And then how are we going to arrive at colors? Who's going to pick the colors?
You know, staff would work on that. You know, we look at the park itself and the playground and just make sure that it looks good.
I see. Okay. This one here, this dog park, this one?
Yeah, these are just samples. So
Yeah,
this
'cause
doesn't mean that it's going to
doesn't
look
look very, that looks like that could turn into a sale real quick to me.
These are just examples
Okay.
of the structure. We don't have to go with these colors or anything like that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about also the engineering. That doesn't look real stable to me.
They will be. They're in the ground, in the concrete, so it's not going anywhere.
All right.
And we have similar structures like that right now at the community park over the where the parents sit on the benches.
Okay. I mean, I totally agree with the Surprise Farms dog park shade structure. I was out there, I don't know, about a month ago, and that's exactly what the people were talking about in the park. Is they loved the dog park, but that was one of the things that made them not go there as often, especially when summer's coming up.
Right.
Because there was no shade, and so I totally agree with that. But anyway, thanks for doing this, and I just don't know where we're going to find the money. So that would be a question. How are we going to find the money, Donna, to do this?
In the future, well, we have the current
We already given
200,000.
200?
Right.
Did we?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As long as we've got that all funded.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Hayden.
Has there been any consideration for solar shade? Let's put some solar up. I notice a lot of schools around the valley do that, and it seems to me it'd be an efficient way for cost recovery.
I haven't seen it specifically on the shade structures that are fabric, but things like ramadas, those sort of things, if there's solar that would perhaps light the ramada, that's something that we would look into. I'm not aware of any on top of these type shade structures.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ramblin.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We have a couple of these structures in my community, so I'm somewhat familiar with the cost, and as some of the other folks were expressing, that seemed like a pretty big number. Are we going to be putting out a RFQ on this?
Correct. It would go through procurement process, and there are companies out there that are on state contract that we could look at and make sure it's competitive.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to check on that, and also to answer the question about the microburst. I think the canvas on ours is rated at like 200 miles an hour or something like that, and the anchoring is like 24 inches in diameter and 6 foot deep underneath one of those poles, so it isn't going anywhere. So, thank you.
Thank you. I was the sponsor of this item, so I really appreciate all the hard work you've done on this. And I really like that you also went out and found the other ones that we can't even cover, because that helps us start discussions about priorities in the future. And the reason I brought this up was I would regularly walk out to the parks and just talk to the mothers with the little kids playing. And whether they're playing on the playground equipment, it gets too hot, and sometimes even if it has its own self cover. Also shade structure, splash pads. They were interested in that because some of those are fairly exposed, and I realize we can't take care of it here. And then the other one is that large park, community park right next to us, where the structure is pretty pricey, but it's a very large playground structure that gets utilized all the time. I mean, they're just kids all over the place. So in trying to take care of some of the requests of some of the parents that I was walking around and talking to in the parks. We got the feedback after we passed this item, and it was really actually quite positive, very positive actually. So this is something that they confirmed that they were looking for. And yes, our budgets are going to be very tight the next couple of years. But if we find any solutions, I think this should rise to the top and at least get consideration. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Councilman Hall.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just one more thing, Donna. What's the time of delivery on these?
We would anticipate taking about 4 months to complete all of these. So they have to manufacture them and go through procurement process.
So May, June, July. So they wouldn't be on until September. We get through this summer. Oh, boy, that's too bad. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. And I noticed a lot of the neighborhoods are putting these in on their own playgrounds as well. So it's very well received. At least in my neighborhood it was, and I think other neighborhoods are having similar results. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Item number 4.
A presentation and discussion pertaining to the Arizona State University Marvin Andrews Fellowship Program and the management internship with the City of Surprise.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor and members of Council. My name is Kristen Ayers, and I am here today to give a brief overview and presentation on the awesome management internship experience that I've had the opportunity of completing in the last 9 months here in the City of Surprise. In this presentation, I will give you a brief overview of the fellowship program that I'm a part of at Arizona State University, as well as give you some idea of the projects I got to work on and the experiences I had in my time here. So I am very fortunate to be able to say that I am part of a Marvin Andrews Fellowship at ASU. This fellowship is specifically designed for students that aspire to be city and county managers in their careers and is named after Marvin Andrews, who was the city manager of Phoenix for 13 years and is one of the most notable city managers in the country. The fellowship is offered as a partnership with the School of Public Affairs at ASU and the Arizona City County Management Association. And we actually have some notable alumni of this fellowship in the room right here. We have Nicole Lance, who is part of the first Marvin Andrews Fellowship class. And we also have Edith Baltieres here next to me, who is part of the second class. This fellowship is special in that it gives students an experiential approach to learning in combination with the theoretical approaches that you learn in the classroom. So at the end of the fellowship, students accumulate a master's in public administration, as well as 2 years of local government experience. So in our first year, we intern with the Alliance for Innovation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to identifying and furthering innovative best practices in local government. And in this internship, I was responsible for completing research requests for a myriad of municipalities across the country and identifying what cities should be doing and how to approach that. And then in our second year, we are placed with a city in the Phoenix metro area that has agreed to host a fellow. So one of the benefits of this fellowship is we are given a mentor who is in the profession. And as luck would have it, I was placed with Nicole Lance. And after a few times of meeting her, I knew it would be an amazing opportunity to get to work under her. And in a few of our meetings, we got to meet here at City Hall, and I got to meet Bob, our city manager, and a few other staff, and I absolutely fell in love with the people here and the culture. And I am so lucky that the city agreed to host me as their first Marvin Andrews Fellow. Some other benefits of this fellowship are we get a tuition waiver for our masters, which is great. And we also get financial support to conferences. So during my 2 years, I got to attend 2 of the Arizona City County Management Association conferences, as well as the International City County Management Association conference in Kansas City. So now that you have some context as to how I got here, I wanted to give you a little overview of the things I got to do while I was here. So in my first 4 months, I got placed in the city manager's office for my first rotation. And here, I really got to look at the city from a high-level approach and even got to work with some outside agencies. I got to perform various research requests for not only the city manager's office, but other departments, including HSCV. And one of my favorite research requests being creating a transportation funding analysis, where I got to look at different funding options for transportation and transit in the city, and even got to work with some members of MAG on creating that. During this rotation, I was taking a class at school in budget and finance, and realized that I had an interest in it and had some strength in it. So I asked Nicole if I could spend some time in the finance department. And again, I got lucky that they agreed to host me for the next few months of my internship. And so down in the finance department, my main role is supporting the budget analyst through the fiscal year 18 budget development process. And I just want to give those people a huge shout out because those are some of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And I learned so much from them and really enjoyed my experience with them. I got to do some benchmarking research there. And my favorite thing there was looking at department proposals for budget requests and needs and really getting to learn about how the city operates in all of the different departments and the things that they need and the things that they do. I really got to understand how the city operates on a whole different level. And then a new thing that I'm getting to do now that happened after I made this presentation is in my last few weeks, I'm working with economic development, helping them with some research that they need. So now for my favorite part of my fellowship and of my short career so far is the initiative that we started here in the city of Women Leading Government. So in my first year of my fellowship, I got to attend the Women Leading Government conference that was hosted by the state chapter. And I was completely inspired by what they were doing. And then when I got to come here, Nicole said, hey, we want Surprise to be at the forefront of this movement. How can we make this happen? So one of my first research requests was looking at what other state chapters are doing and how they're keeping cities involved and keeping the momentum going. So I got to talk to 4 other state chapters and hear some lessons learned and some best practices and advice that they had. And really what I learned is that we're at the forefront and we're already doing more than most other states and other cities are doing. So once we actually got to launch the Women Leading Government chapter, somehow I got lucky enough to be a co-lead on the mentoring committee. And we have officially launched our mentoring program and we have 21 matches. And it is so amazing and humbling to get to see something that I worked on for the last 9 months come to fruition. And my last thing with the Women Leading Government was I got to help create and present on a webinar for the state chapter on the efforts that we did here in Surprise to teach other organizations and other municipalities on how they can make the same thing happen in their organization. So those are an overview of some of the projects and things I got to work on. And this slide, I'd like to give you an idea of the things that I got to do outside of the day-to-day cubicle things of an intern. And I just want to note that none of these things would have been possible for me to do without the support of all of the staff and department directors here that said yes to allowing me to do any of these things. So first, I got to do a police and a fire ride-along, which was an incredible experience, not only in that it was fun and interesting, but I now can look at what they do and understand and appreciate more what they do, because I would have never known if I hadn't gone out there and spent 8 hours with them. I also got to do the point-in-time homelessness count with HSCV in the police department, which was the most humbling experience of my life so far, getting to meet our homeless population, understanding why they're in the predicament that they are, and helping getting them connected to resources. Another thing I think is special about our city is that we have a youth services team that is doing more than most cities are doing. And so I got to spend some time with them, got to attend a youth council meeting, got to be a chaperone for our amazing Level 4 event, and last week got to sit on a panel for the Youth Employment Career Fair and speak to 100 plus high schoolers, which was frightening, but a great experience in itself. And lastly, I got to meet people in this city, whether they were department directors, staff, managers, anyone, and every single one of them agreed to go to lunch with me, agreed to meet with me, and get to know them on a more personal level and learn from them. I can say that I have so many informal mentors here that I am so grateful for. And with that, it brings me to the most important part of this conversation in this presentation, and that's to say thank you. And first, to say thank you for council for setting the direction and making it a priority to take care of our future generation of leaders and making it known that it was good to have an intern here in the city. And next, to say thank you to all of our city management and department director staff for saying yes to hosting your first Marvin Andrews Fellow. And then thank you to all of the staff in the city for saying yes to everything I asked and always being open to teaching me and helping me learn through this amazing experience. And so thank you so much for allowing me to serve this organization and this community. And wherever I go next has some big shoes to fill.
Thank you. That's great. Are there any council comments? Seeing none, Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to you. You were highly visible, and I interacted a little bit with you with the youth. Just a nice role model for our kids here, and you have outstanding, and it sounds like you've had an amazing experience with some amazing leaders that are in this organization. So congratulations on the women leading government effort and your project there. That's outstanding. And I hope kids at home are watching this and absorbing and seeing the opportunity out there. You'll make an amazing leader within city government one day.
I also want to say thanks. This sounds like a great program, and I'm glad we are keeping two from the program, and I wish you luck. I'm excited the breadth of everything you did. I'm real interested in the FEMA exercise, the virtual exercise that you did. That's something that, we've been talking about here at the city, tabletop exercises or emergency management operation that eventually I'm hoping the city here will have also, because those things are all important, but all the other things. And I'm just listening to you. Yeah, it was substantial, not only for you, but I think your contribution was substantial for the city as well. And I'm pretty sure they kept you pretty busy, because I've worked with Nicole a few times, and boy, I literally have blisters on my feet when she gets going from meetings to meetings. So thank you, and good luck with the rest of your career.
Thank you.
We have no executive session. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Motion and second has been made. All in favor? Aye. Aye. We are adjourned.